Welcome to Lificast. It's the official podcast of the Leeds International Festival of Ideas 2022. I'm Johnny Ianson, and it's lovely to be here. Today, we are talking sport and the power of sports people. We live in a world where sports people are lauded and celebrated, worshipped, dare I say, as well, treated like demigods. Paradoxically, we're also living at a time when they're placed under probably more scrutiny than ever. And as a result, are often blamed and attacked and pilloried and chastised for living a life of privilege and luxury, and at times complete detachment from the real world. With success and profile comes opportunity, but not just opportunity to go to the best parties and buy the best cars, but to make a real difference in this world. So whether we're talking about Marcus Rashford campaigning to feed our hungry children, or Colin Kaepernick taking the knee and starting a global movement, or Martina Navratilova coming out at the height of her career, we look at these people at a time where sport has the power to change the world and to make the people within it realize that there are others out there who are just like them. On this episode of Lificast, we ask the question, does sport have a social duty? I have a wonderful collection of guests with me to talk about it. Georgia Taylor-Brown, MBE, joins us, world champion triathlete, gold and silver Olympic medalist based here in Leeds, and is sponsored by the Phoenix Foundation. Georgia, how are you?
Good, thank you.
Thank you for being here. Paul Watkins is here as well, Director of Fundraising at the Leeds Hospital Charity. He spent a career working in the charity sector with high-profile individuals, and at the moment is focused on raising £5 million to develop the Rob Burrows Centre for MND, which we built at the Seacroft Hospital here in Leeds. How are you, Paul?
Very well, sir.
And thank you very much for being here. Professor Leanne Norman, too, a Professor of Sport and Socio-Cultural Studies and Director of the Centre for Social Justice in Sport and Society within the Carnegie School of Sports, and has a particular focus on gender equality and issues of diversity. Hello.
Hi, Johnny.
Okay, so let's talk sport. And I'm going to start with the sportsperson straight away, because that seems to make sense, Georgia. Where do you feel your responsibility as an athlete lies when it comes to beyond triathlon and the sport?
I think the biggest thing for me, and the reason I do sport, is, well, I clearly enjoy it very much because I don't put my body through all that pain for no reason. But I want to leave a bit of a legacy. I want younger kids to look up to me and see that I was just a normal child doing normal things and from a normal background, not privileged at all. I just found something that I really enjoyed, and I stuck at it, and I had a dream as a 10-year-old to win an Olympic medal, and I stuck by that, and I really truly believe that I could do it. I just want to be able to inspire the next generation, and make kids believe in themselves that they can do it, and just go after that goal.
You obviously achieved that goal pretty spectacularly, of winning a gold medal and a silver medal at the Tokyo Olympics. Did you feel all of a sudden, though, there was even more pressure as the eyes of the world were on you, looking for you as something other than an athlete, as potentially a role model?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, when it comes to an Olympic Games, there's more pressure than any other race, because it's not just you racing then, it's an Olympic Games, so everyone knows about it. Not many people know about a world triathlon race that might be happening in Hamburg one weekend, but everybody knows that the Olympics is happening. So everyone is rooting for you and wants you to do well, but that then puts a lot of pressure on you because you feel like you have to do well and you have to perform, and you're not just part of British triathlon, I'm now part of Team GB. And I feel like I have a responsibility to add to that medal tally. And you want to be a part of that medal tally as well. You see the first medals coming in, and you want to be a part of that. You want to give back to the team. You do feel a big responsibility, and also you feel like you have to be very, very professional on the race course, because what you do has a massive impact on all the kids that are watching. There's some athletes that might be out there, make mistakes on the course or the field of play because it's got a bit heated in the moment and they make the wrong choices, and that has a massive impact on people watching. For example, Wimbledon at the weekend, the men's final, the Australian, he maybe is a little bit too aggressive. And I know that my physio was watching with his two young boys, and he said it was a bit awkward to actually watch that as a family, because he doesn't want his kids watching that and thinking that that's okay in sport. And I get that you get angry, but as a professional athlete on screen, you do have a responsibility to tame that anger.
I would love to sit down and have a chat with Nick Kyrgios. We'll see if we can get him on the podcast. It would have to be a late night version though, listening to some of the language. Paul, you work with high profile athletes. Obviously the work that you're doing at the moment with Rob Burrow, raising money for his MND centre, and the incredible work that the Leeds Rhinos legend Kevin Sinfield has been undertaking, raising literally millions of pounds for it. Does he talk about his responsibility or the weight of expectation that he feels as a professional sports person?
Kev's one of those people. I've had the privilege of spending a bit of time with him recently, and he's very quiet. He's very mild-mannered. He doesn't talk about his achievement. He's always, we had a pep talk the night before we did the 101-mile challenge, the extra mile challenge, where he ran from Leicester Tigers ground to Headingley. And the night before, it was all about us looking after ourselves, not him. It was all the focus was on all the other people around him. And I think particularly with Kev and the challenge there, he's one of that team, that famous team of Leeds Rhinos. You've got Barry McDermott, Jamie Peacock, Jones Buchanan. And what I think it's about one of theirs, that is a family, and you talked about responsibility, George, and I think that they feel a responsibility for Rob. He's one of theirs. So he rarely talks about any pressure for him, and he puts it to one side, actually, and he puts his body through what he does. He ran 7 marathons, and it was all about, if Rob's going through that, this is the least I can do to try and help. And as you said, he's raised millions as a result of it. It's absolutely phenomenal. The last challenge he raised £2.5 million. It's just absolutely phenomenal.
Professor Norman, we've heard from Georgia very humbly about the difference he wants to make in the legacy. You've done loads of research in this area. What have you learnt about that? Maybe the consequence of the weight of expectation on people being role models and the ability to do good rather than just be an athlete.
Well, I think athletes want to engage in these agendas, and I think that they've been perhaps so constrained by sport because the system's quite rigid. Our ideas of what is sport, and we're seeing that now, of course, with transgendered issues. We're trying to make tweaks and changes within a very binary constrained model. And so I think athletes have perhaps, and Georgia will know, more than anyone, what they perhaps have felt constrained within sport. And I think what we're seeing is a rise in athlete activism, particularly around issues to do with, social justice. And I think some athletes want to engage that. So there's an element, and you can hear that in Georgia's story, about wanting to be that role model. There's an expectation, I think, now with sports having a role in, a social duty role. But I think with athletes, for many athletes, they want to be doing this athlete activism and speaking out.
It's a really interesting point, that, Georgia, because this is nothing new, is it? You can go back years, decades, when I think about the likes of Tommy Smith and John Carlos with the Black Power salute at the Mexico 68 Olympics. It's been going on a long time, but their careers were affected by making a stance like that. And I just wonder, from your perspective, does anybody ever have a conversation, or have you heard of sponsors talking to their athletes saying, look, we just want you to be an athlete. We don't want you to get involved in controversial issues because this might affect our brand. This could affect the way that the public perceive us rather than just you as an athlete.
Not really with my sponsors. I guess you choose, I'm lucky enough to choose my sponsors well and choose ones that suit me as an athlete and my values and beliefs. So for instance, being part of the Phoenix Foundation, like I said, I want to leave an impact, and I want kids to have the opportunity to try sports because I know how expensive it is. I know how difficult it is. So if they have an opportunity from a young age to just get into a sport and find out that they love it, then I wanted to be a part of that. So when the opportunity came to be part of the Phoenix Foundation, I knew I wanted to be part of that team of athletes, other athletes as well that are part of that. And breaking barriers recently, they broke the Ironman barrier. So they broke the sub 7 hour and sub 8 hour world record attempts. And just being able to push those barriers for kids to see the fact that a human, like when Kipchoge did the sub 2 hour marathon, a human can physically do this if you believe you can and have the team around you, you can do it. But I think, going back to sort of leaving a legacy and feeling like I need to have an impact and inspire the next generation, I feel like I need to do that because that's what people before me did for me as well. I looked up to older athletes, and because I looked up to them and saw them competing well and being so successful, I wanted to be part of that.
Who were those athletes? And what would have happened if they weren't there?
For me, Kelly Holmes is the one that comes to mind straight away, because I remember we were on a holiday in St Ives in Cornwall at the time when she won her 2 medals in Athens, and hearing the story of her coming back from the injuries that she had and fought so hard because she really, really wanted it, and she wasn't going to let an injury just knock her back and ruin her chances. And I, vividly remember just sat in the living room watching those 2 races happen while we were on holiday. So that was like really, really inspiring for me. Seeing someone want it that bad, and then for her to finish and see all the emotions run through her body and how much it meant to her. You just, as an athlete, that's the feeling you want. And that's the feeling I had crossing the line at the Olympic Games. Like, it's almost a relief when you cross that line at the Games, because everything that you've worked for over the years, it's like, it's all gone now, and you're happy it's done and you've succeeded.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess there's also a feeling of then what's next as well, is there?
Yeah, it's a bit of a weird journey, the Olympics. You get so excited before the race.
Yeah.
And then you get, because you've got like all the cool things like kitting out and all the attentions on you, which you love.
Getting the tracksuit must be so exciting.
Yeah, that's really, really cool. And then you sort of get there and the nerves kick in. The night before, I didn't sleep at all. And then like I said, you then really, really nervous before the race, and then you race and all the adrenaline's going through you, and it's amazing. It's an incredible experience. And then you cross the finish line, and I think I experienced every single emotion because I had an injury leading into it. So I was just like I said, it's just a release just a relief of everything. And then, you've achieved the goals. You're on a high for a few days because, again, you're getting so much media attention and it's great and everyone's sending you all these messages. And then you come home and it's still great. You've got an Olympic medal, but then you think, well, what now?
Yeah.
Like, I've just put 4 years of my life into this one medal. What do I do now? Because I've achieved what I wanted to achieve. So where do I go from here? So it's a bit of a journey, a bit of a roller coaster, if you want to say. But I think you just have to be quite smart about how you go about the come down, I guess, from the Olympic Games, and just take the time to soak everything in and enjoy it. But going back to your question, definitely Kelly Holmes would be the main person that I think of when I think of who inspired me.
And Paul, has Kevin Sinfield or any of the others that you've worked with on this project, or any others, ever spoken about maybe their motivation for doing this? Is it the fact that they've finished and they now need something else, or they feel a sense of obligation because they were given a privileged life in the world of sport to give something back?
In all honesty, no, we haven't talked on that level. I mean, what I get a sense of, and I touched on it in my first answer, was about that sense of camaraderie from the Leeds Rhinos team that was so successful as a unit. And Kevin's still involved in rugby, as are a few of the others. So I don't know whether or not they're still craving that spotlight. You'd have to ask them, Johnny. But I don't think that's the motivation for this endeavour. This is about helping a friend, and you could see that every time you're in their presence. It's actually really beautiful to see. It's a purest sense of friendship I've probably witnessed. It's absolutely, it's there and palpable.
Yeah.
But I think it's quite well documented about sportswomen craving that spotlight once their career comes to an end. And as you say, Joe, once you got the medal, what do you do next? How do you? Some people don't do charity for purely altruistic reasons. That's the other thing that we might touch on that later on. But, people looking for a cause, that drive, we're talking about people that have put every ounce of their being into being a success, either on this playing field or on the running track. What's that replaced with afterwards? That must be a huge challenge.
Leanne, let's talk about something that we were touching on before we started the conversation, actually, of the disparity between men and women in sport. And I know that this is something that you've done quite a bit of work on. and the importance in having visible female athletes when it comes to things like equality of pay and equality of opportunity. Does it take more than just a sports person to be visible, though? Do they have to speak out actively against an injustice, be it inequality of pay or opportunity within sports?
Well, yes and no. I think just being visible is important because it's this idea of normalising. You know, for example, last night, turning on the TV of a Monday night and women's football's on TV, and that's just normal. And I think that's what we're trying to get to, that we don't have to speak about it because it's just normal. So there's a certain aspect of, every time a woman is prominent in sport, that she doesn't have to speak for something, and that we just get to the point that it's just normal and she's visible. But at the same time, you do risk at the moment, because we have such inequality in sport, that there might be some blind spots created by a silence. And so I think it's very important for athletes to use their platform in that way. My concern at the same time is that there's a certain, what we would call, a burden of representation, that the issues such as pay that we've seen in the US with the US Soccer, Federation, that those issues fall then on the people that they burden the most, and it's up to them to speak out. And that's where allyship's really important. But I would like it to be that it's not just women speaking on these issues. And that, because then you have the kind of the backlash, they're only speaking about it because, etc. So I think there's that burden of representation often on these athletes. It's those who are affected by it the most. So we would like to get to the point where we don't have to talk about it because it's normal. It's just built in. We were talking before about triathlon, where gender equality is just normal, and it's just the way that we do things around here. But then at the same time, like I said, in some sports, we don't have that that privilege. And so, yes, our athletes do have to speak out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting to think that Venus Williams in 2006, I think it was, which isn't that long ago, wrote an open letter to Wimbledon saying, why are you not paying us the same? And it was actually brought up in Parliament because of it. And that was frighteningly recent. And if you think about Billie Jean King in the Battle of the Sexes in 1973, when she played Bobby Riggs, to something like 50 million people watched it on TV, to eventually, or the aim was to put to bed who is better at this sport and should women belong in tennis. I mean, it's crazy to think about that. But what your sport, it seems, Georgia, doesn't suffer the same issues of inequality, particularly when it comes to pay, as I understand it.
Yeah.
And it seems that it's something that I think has been part of the sport since it certainly grew and has grown over the past few years.
Yeah, as long as I've been in triathlon, which is nearly 10 years now, there's always been equal pay, equal opportunity. We have the same race venues, which you do not get in a lot of other sports. I don't know for every sport, but for example, cycling, they don't have equal opportunities. The women can't do a Tour de France, which is the biggest sporting event for the men. The women can't do that, and they don't have equal pay there. And you just wonder why our sport's doing it. And if we can do it, why can't every sport? It just doesn't make sense. But it's it is hard for me to talk about because I can't sympathize so much with them because I don't understand, because I'm not in that situation. We're very lucky that we do have equal opportunities and equal pay. And it shouldn't be that I'm lucky to be in a sport like that. It should just be the case, as Leanne was just saying. But right now, I do feel lucky that I am in a sport where I do have equal pay and equal opportunity. I don't know when it comes to private contracts between each individual, between men and women with the same sponsor. Maybe the contracts are different there. You don't know because that's a private and personal contract. But when it comes to prize money, it's all equal.
The athletes, I guess, find themselves in a difficult position, Paul, because, for instance, Marcus Rashford, when he was fighting for kids to still be given the school meal vouchers over the summer holidays, which he eventually was given, he's then pilloried when he has a poor performance on the pitch. And fans say, well, you need to focus on being a footballer, not a social activist. So it seems like athletes find themselves sometimes in a kind of impossible position when they're trying to do the right thing.
Yeah, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. And I think footballers are often put into that. They're the lightning rod for a lot of this, is because of the salaries that they attract. And I'd much rather, Marcus has just recently given 50,000 copies of a book to children to talk about his story, to actively encourage them to try and change their reality. Brilliant. Why not? You'd much rather that than he spends it on a new car or whatever. So, you could argue that he got some self-publicity out of that, but who cares? If he helps one of those 50,000, good for him. Absolutely. But yeah, people, I think football particularly is quite tribal, and if the team aren't performing on the pitch, or he isn't performing as part of that team, then people lash out, and unfortunately that's the most obvious thing that they can lash out against him, and it's quite sad.
Is there a potential, Leanne, that people talk about social issues and campaign on social issues so much that the public become immune to it? And I'm thinking about taking the knee, for instance, in football. That's now just part and parcel of a game, and I would say that most people now don't think about the reason that players are taking the knee, about that horrific death of George Floyd in America is what prompted this, that it becomes just lost in the white noise of sport almost.
Yeah, I think there is that risk that it is seen as a gesture, and you can see now that when it's done, like you said, Johnny, at the start of a game, that people, used to applaud it. I think it's almost like now it's become part of a ritual.
Yeah.
And I think the problem is what we're not seeing is that matched with other responsibilities, drives, interventions, commitments from the wider, bigger structure of sport. Tackling racism in sport. I don't see much action on a bigger scale by the federations, by the governing bodies. So there's not that joined up thinking. And so it's been left to the players, and it's then become seen as a gesture. And that's because it's not matched, really, with the federations who have the power and resource to actually intervene and do something. So the response there, from an organisational point of view, has been quite apathetic, and almost that responsibility put on the players. And I don't see that action matched, really, at a bigger scale, where the people who really can influence change and make the change.
Would it take a chain reaction of the fans taking up the cause? And then, for instance, in this case, if we're talking about the FA and we talk about the number of black managers,
yes,
7 black managers in professional football out of 92 clubs, woefully underrepresented. But does it take the fans to start saying, where are the black managers, rather than just the players, for instance?
Yeah, I think fan power is huge, and I think we can't underestimate that. And so, yes, it would take fans, but I think it's more collective than that. I think at the heart of these inequities and inequalities is there's a sense of power invested in this, and self-interest, if we're going to be quite honest about it. And so you can see, with UEFA, FIFA, there's a lot of self-interest in keeping the system the way it is. And that's where we really need to tackle those discriminatory policies that lie at the heart of this. Really, who is this system serving? They're bigger, more tricky questions to ask. But really, that's where the changes need to happen.
I know that you've done a lot of work, Leanne, with the relationship between coaches and athletes. And
yes.
I just wonder, from your perspective, Georgie, does your coach or coaches influence you as a person more than just an athlete?
Yeah, I guess so. The coaches have a big impact on what we do. I mean, we're around them every single day. So yeah, they do guide us in the right direction, and we have a lot. If there's something that comes up, recently British Triathlon released their transgender policy. So we did have a big British Triathlon meeting about that, just in case anything did come up, and if people sort of start turning up at training centres and throwing abuse at us for that. And it's not like we're taught how to deal with these things, and we're here to do a job. I know that we want to make a change, but at the same time, there's a lot of noise going on outside of my training and sport. But at the end, like you were saying, damned if you do, damned if you don't. They want us to have an opinion on other things that happen in sport, inequality, the transgender stuff at the minute, the taking the knee. But then they also expect us to compete well and go well there. And there's just so much noise around. it's hard to please everyone.
Yeah.
And you do get backlash online. If there's something I see and I want to make a comment on it because I do have an opinion on something, I might type it out and then I hold back posting it because I think, no, I might lose a lot of respect there because I've had my own opinion. And it's sad that I can't put my opinion out there. But you do, again, sort of going back to me having responsibilities as an athlete to younger generations, I have to think about that as well and the impact that might have on them. They might then stop supporting me and think, oh, well, I don't want to be part of that sport anymore if that's what she thinks. So, there's so much noise. Yeah, there is a lot.
You just wanted to run, cycle and swim around.
Yeah, and people say, oh, don't listen to what others say online. But when it's right there in front of you on so many different platforms, it's hard not to.
Well, social media is a cesspit. Yeah. It's a bare pit and a cesspit. It's a very difficult place to be, being anybody, let alone being a high profile person. And like you say, the thing about athletes as well is they have that profile, don't they? As we've seen with Marcus Rashford or Gary Lineker, for instance, there is a great opportunity there to use that as a mouthpiece and to use that as an extra way of campaigning, really.
Mm. Yeah, I agree. I think that the athletes almost in that way are a resource to speak out. But like we've said a bit earlier, there is also then the backlash that they fear, like George is talking about, and not just from the public, from sponsors. I think that is changing. We're doing some work in the centre, some of the team, on tackling online hate in football, and there's some really interesting early findings coming out about that, about the emotional labour for sports people, particularly for women, to engage in social media and use that as a platform. It seems to be that it's more discriminatory against female athletes, right. In this case, female footballers. So there was a greater acceptance of male footballers to use social media as a platform to speak out. They didn't have the backlash. So like George is saying there, a great example of, holding back her opinion. The male footballers didn't report that. They felt able to talk about social issues. When we talked to the female footballers and the team talked to the female footballers, there wasn't that sense of freedom. So they often use social media to just, great game yesterday, or shame about the loss. And there was this sense of emotional labour that I can't put myself out there because of the backlash. And so that impact, like you said, Johnny, at the start, what's the impact on the athletes? To have to manage that daily, in addition to, what they just want to do, to play the sport, compete, that's something you have to manage every day.
Yeah, I mean, there's an irony that gender inequality prevents them from speaking out against something like gender inequality.
Yes.
It becomes this feedback loop that just continues to be this negative cycle.
Yes. Yeah.
What's the experience from your end, Paul, of being out there and seeing the public, though, the people who are on the receiving end of this campaigning? We know this is specifically what you're doing at the moment is raising money for the motor neuron disease centre, but you are seeing people out there with the likes of Kevin Sinfield, watching him do his work firsthand. Yeah. It must be overwhelmingly positive, what people are saying to you about the things that these guys are doing.
Well, it is, and I think it transcends. There's the condition, but what he's managed to do is coalesce the whole community. I mean, and it was not just Leeds Rhinos fans on that, that lined the route from Leicester to Leeds. There were, many clubs represented, and they all got behind one of theirs, if you like. What's been incredible, the MND, the whole issue of MND, I think Kevin and Rob, Stephen Darby, Doddy Weir, there's some very prominent sports people that have raised the profile now, and the condition has attracted a lot more publicity in the last, certainly the last 3 years, to the point where the government did commit to giving £50 million towards research, and I think that is as a direct result of the high profile sports people that have actually come out and talked about their condition very, the most vulnerable time in their life, where they have effectively been given a sentence. There's no cure for MND yet. And yet they're willing to sort of lay out on the line and say, this is what's happening to me and my body. Can you help try and find a cure? Or in the meantime, because we're trying to develop a centre where people can live their best life, with the time that they've got, and also provide that support to their wider family too. So I think that they've really empowered other people with MND too, to be open about it. It's not something that's hidden anymore. People, can almost, say, I've got MND, and look at look at what we're trying to achieve, whereas before it just wasn't there in the profile.
Yeah, and that visibility of people being comfortable to talk about it, whether it's something like that or Tyson Fury talking about his mental health problems.
Absolutely.
Just going to wrap this up now, and I just wanted to ask you, Professor Norman, about this idea that the next generation of athletes are growing up in a world of social media and seeing visible sports people talking about it. Will it become part and parcel that we would just expect every athlete to talk about social issues and to try and make some kind of social change? Do they talk to you about feeling that sense of responsibility as the next generation?
Yeah, I think there is a sense of responsibility. How can I use my role? And also a sense of expectation as well. So I think with Generation Z, I think it's not just an expectation, and I'm feeling pushed to talk about it. I want to talk about it because these issues are just so important to me. We know those issues around like environmental justice, inequality, they are more important to this generation. So I think it will just be they want to talk about it because this is what's important to them. So I'm hoping that is the direction that sport will take. What we need to do is match that then with an expectation, responsibility on the clubs, the governing bodies as well, the federations, the people that can make the huge macro changes as well.
And I'll leave the final word to you, Georgia. It seems appropriate. You mentioned right at the start about your work with the Phoenix Foundation, and you joined or started this sport because you wanted to inspire the next generation of kids that aren't from a privileged background or a necessarily sporty background. So if there is that kid at home who's looking at you, who's thinking maybe this could be me, what would your advice be to them? What would you say?
I think just give sport a go. Try different sports. That's exactly what I did. I realised dancing was not for me at an early age.
So did I, actually.
Yeah, I tried so many different sports. And I did literally write a PowerPoint presentation when I was 10 for my parents, as you do in primary school, all about me, my favourite colour, and things that my hobbies, things I loved. And I did put on there that I wanted to go to Commonwealth Games, go to an Olympic Games, and maybe even win a medal. So my dad has that presentation still. So it kind of, I think just if you've got a dream, write it down on a piece of paper, put it away in a drawer somewhere in a safe place, and just keep looking at that. And that's kind of what I say to every kid that I meet. Just have that dream and know that you can achieve it. If you really, really want it, you can get it. You can get anything if you put everything into it. So I think just the big thing is though to enjoy it. I enjoy my job so much. And the day I wake up and I don't want to do it anymore is the day I retire, because I'm not going to be able to do this forever. So while I'm doing it, I want to love every minute of it, because I'm very fortunate that I get to have this job. So go for your dream, but also enjoy it at the same time. And
don't forget the PowerPoint presentation as well. Thank you all for joining me. It's been a really fascinating chat today. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time. That's it from us. Does sport have a social duty? I think the answer is probably yes, as you can hear from today. And do make sure you join us next time for the next episode of Lificast, the official podcast of the Leeds International Festival of Ideas 2022.